Okay, Sachi, this is a letter of love from three of John's best friends, from a part of his life that you and your mom probably don't have any recollection of. I'm joined by Dennis Schoenhart. I'm Mike. Dennis Schoenhart and Phil Sykes. Now, we three were a singing group, and John, we would do concerts, and John would be the comedy angle, and we'd provide the music. And we did concerts all over the area when we were going to college. So, first, Phil, I want you and I met John in 1969. Tell me about your first meeting.
Well, as I recall, uh, John and I lived in the same dorm, although I didn't know him from the dorm directly. And then I was taking an acting class, and the professor said, "We need guys who can sing to audition for the show Hello, Dolly." And so I had never auditioned for anything before. I went to the audition. John was one of the principals in the show. Michael was also auditioning. And in the course of that experience of producing Hello, Dolly, Michael and I started to sing in the men's change room, and our voices went together pretty well. And we walked out of the change room, and there were several girls there listening to us, of course. and and they said, "You guys ought to sing together." And so we started to do that. Well, John was in the show, and we just became friends. He was such a force of nature when it came to the stage. He had no fear and was funny. He was naturally funny. And I think he really worked at it.
As I recall, oh, he was naturally funny. I understood humor. My dad had a great sense of humor, but John knew how to make people laugh, and I learned from him how to make people laugh. So my first memory of him was in the cafeteria because we both lived in the dorm, and I went to college and I was going to wrestle. So I went to and I had a voice lesson. I took the voice lesson. They said you got to try out for the opera. Tried out for the opera, and they said, "Why don't you come be in the musical?" And I said, "When's the musical?" "Fall." "When's the opera?" "Spring." "Wrestling in the middle." "I'm set." So I went to the musical and got into that, and I was athletic enough to move, but I wasn't really a dancer. But I could. But we had good choreographers, so I did that. And then you had a speaking part. I was just dancing, and John actually had a lead. He played Barnaby, and he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant, and for a big guy who was kind of round at the time, he could move on his toes, and but he was so hilarious.
Yeah.
So I remember, Phil, you were singing, you were armed with your guitar and a memory full of Gordon Lightfoot songs, and John knew how to make people laugh. And I think the first time John and I really connected was on the bus down to Salt Lake City, where we did the show for a week, and he and I were doing backflips off the hangers of the luggage in the bus, and the bus driver saw us, and he hit the brakes, and we went skidding down the road, and he said, "Knock that off." Dennis, you came into the word circle a little bit later. What was your first memory of Crafto?
Well, my first memory or exposure before I actually officially met John was I went to an assembly. I can't remember if it was late '69 or early '70. I know we hooked up as a band, Virgo and Aries, with Program Bureau in 1970. But I had gone to an assembly where there was a lot of dance acts. And there was this group of guys, you guys, Mike Claybeard, Phil Sykes, and John Kraft, that came out in between and entertained the audience. During one of those entertaining moments, well, sometime during the afternoon, I mean, then there was like, this was in the field house. There was about 4,000 people.
It was
Maybe more because
festival with both
yeah,
stakes from the college. So basically
yeah,
every kid in the college was there.
it was full. I'll bet there was close to 5,000 people.
Yeah.
floor had the basketball floor had seats on it, and the arena itself was full.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, one
sometimes,
other thought. Um, Deanne Worthen had asked us to fill, and back then the way because when they were after the dances, they were going to decide who the winner was. So
yeah,
after the dances, we were supposed to go out there and fill. And the way
yeah,
we did it is we told each other jokes. We had all these dumb jokes. So we
yes,
tell a joke, and then we say, okay, you act that part, you act that part, you act that part. And that was how I did our comedy at that time. Well, what was supposed to be a 10-minute fill ended up being about an hour fill. And so we'd do a bit, had no idea what we were doing next. We'd look off the stage and she's going, stretch, stretch.
stretch, yeah, stretch. I remember that too. Yeah. Well, I was an audience member at the time, and I hadn't met you guys, but I remember at some course of the afternoon there was some balloons that were released or something were floating around, and during your stretching and doing your act, there was a balloon that was floating over the audience about 20 feet from the stage and about 10 feet over the audience. I remember it was like a reddish orange balloon, and the other 2 or 3 balloons were off somewhere else. But this balloon was hovering in front of the stage about 20 feet away, 10 feet off the ground. And John saw that. And John he left where you guys were and walked all the way down stage onto the apron with his toes against the edge of the apron and put his hand out and said, "Come to me." And this balloon floated over and landed right in his hand. And everybody went crazy.
Add to that, Phil.
Everything that happened during that time, during that dance festival thing, and all the acts, that's what people remembered the most, was that balloon magically coming over into John Kraft's hand, and the feeling was, it was amazing, the timing and what had happened, and that was my exposure to John. And you guys, but mostly John, before I officially met and hooked up with you guys in 1970. Or I think I'm not sure when that assembly was. Could have been 69, could have been early.
It was spring of 70, and we met you in fall of 70.
Yeah, okay.
Phil, add your part to that story.
Well, I mean, I was on stage, and Mike and I had been singing, trying to keep the audience calm while the judges were calculating and tabulating, and there's Deanne Worthen going, stretch. And so we had kind of chatted, as I recall, we'd kind of chatted, Mike and John and I, about doing these comedy skits, and we just kind of said, okay, you do this part and you do this part and I'll do this part. We kind of knew each other's stuff well enough at that point that we could pick up and go with it.
Here, I remember one of them. One of them was the 3 ministers gather and talk about how they handle the offering.
That's right. And so there was the minister, the priest, and the rabbi.
That's it.
And the minister said, when I get the collection, I draw a line on the floor of my office. What falls to the right, when I throw it up in the air, what falls to the right goes to the Lord. What falls on the left, I keep for my own care and keeping.
And the evangelical guy says, I draw a circle, and when I throw it in the air, what falls on the inside goes to the Lord, and what falls on the outside, I keep.
And the rabbi said,
and then John would say,
the rabbi said, what I do is when I get the collection, I throw it in the air, and what he wants, he keeps.
That's it. That was a joke. And we did that one. And then Dennis, I remember doing the one about the army guys and the time that in the military and you're getting your underwear, right? And they asked for shorts. And so the first guy asked for 2 shorts, which would be, how is that going to work? Well, I wash one, I wear one, I wash one, I wear one. Second guy gets 7. That's one day every week. And then the third guy, Dennis, you did that bit. The
Yeah, he
third
said he
time was
wanted 12. He says, I'll take 12. And he says, what do you mean 12? He said, well, that's January, February, March, April.
that was the level of our comedy. It was ridiculously stupid, but we made it work for some.
I loved it. People loved it. People
And
went
then
crazy.
there was the Italian army, right? Where the general comes up and he goes, "Today, men, I got some good news and some bad news.
Yeah.
Today, after 6 months on the battlefield, we get to change our underwear. Hey, change it.
Hey.
What's the bad news?
Bad news is, Tony, you change with a Luigi. Luigi, you change with
Yeah.
That was it. That was how we would do humor. It was
Yeah.
late 60s and 70s.
Yeah. 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 That was
crazy.
incredible. That was funny.
It was great. So that was kind of how we started it in our world with him, and then we just hang out, and everywhere we went, it was funny. I have to tell the story of Sportsman's Cafe, and then when I come back to when we would do concerts. But we did the Sportsman's Cafe. Do you remember that? At Rick's College, the women had a curfew, and then we could go afterwards. Once we put the women back in their dorm, then we would whatever roused about. And we went to this cafe that had fresh potatoes, hash brown potatoes, for 15 cents. You got a whole plate, whole big plate. And then for another 10 cents, they'd fill gravy over it. So you could have a plate of gravy hash browns for 25 cents. So we went there to get that. And John started telling the stories. Were you there, Phil?
I was there on one occasion, yeah.
And
I
he
was
started telling stories. And one night I remember he told stories. I just laughed. He told stories until 4 in the morning. We got there about midnight. He started telling stories till 4 in the morning, and there were students there, but they were the local guys who'd been drinking and came in to sober up before they went home.
All the cattlemen and truck drivers
Yeah,
came in, and John held court.
it was.
And he was the center of. He put on a show, and it was just comedy routines, like bit jokes after joke after joke, and it was incredible. Just, I understand he used to sit at home with comedy albums, and he would write out the jokes from his favorite comedians.
Yeah,
And he would study them to see how they were set up and how the punchline was delivered and so on, so that he was developing that skill set that the pros had. And he was magnificent.
Well, he was an only child because his grandpa was John Kraft. His dad was John Kraft Jr., and he was called Junior. And then John was Johnny within the circle of the family. I went back to Chicago one summer and lived with him. You and I drove. In fact, you were driving his car, Stanley Studmeyer, with fingers. You had just a finger on the wheel, weaving in and out of traffic at 80 miles an hour on 8 lanes. And I'd been asleep. We would drive all the way across. And I'm this country boy, and you're from Toronto, so you knew city traffic. I wake up and you and John are talking, and it's daybreak, and we're hitting city traffic, and you guys are just sliding through traffic. And I wake up and I look out that window and I go, "Holy crap, man, you're gonna die!" And you're just going, "Yeah, well, crowd." Way we went, but so he had it. So his dad married later after our time, and that's when Yoshi and Sachi and Adam came into being, and that was all after we had done things together. We have we have to tell the story of the tape. Tell the story of the tape when we went on our missions.
Oh, Michael, John, and I left for missions within about a month of each other. I think you went first, or John went first. John went to Australia. Yeah. You went to northern BC or BC and Alaska, southern Alaska, and I was serving in Italy. And these are the days way before internet, way before anything like that. And it was either you wrote a letter, or
Airmail.
one of the cool technology things was to take a cassette tape and to record a message.
Yeah.
And so we hit on the idea of recording one side of the tape, and I would send it to Michael in British Columbia. Michael would listen to my message, flip the tape over, record his message about life in the mission field, and then he would send that to John in Australia. And John would listen to both sides and then record over me and send it to me. And the cycle would go on and on. It would repeat itself. And so throughout the 2 years that we served as missionaries, we heard from each other. We heard each other's voices and told each other stories in our voices from all around the world. It was pretty spectacular when you think about it.
Do you
Oh,
have
yeah.
another memory, Phil or Dennis?
Well,
Well,
I
think about
was
it.
just I was just thinking about the time, I met John Kraft 54 years ago. And when college was over, we all went our separate ways. I was married and having children, and ended up in Salt Lake and working as a stagehand and eventually touring. But I was at the Clay Pier home 3.5 years ago. And I know that Mike had tried to call a number of times when I was there, John. But John was either at home or not answering his phone. And we were in his little, in Mike's little room off to the side of the living room in his library with a couple of chairs and a piano. And Mike had called, and lo and behold, John Kraft answered. And I was kind of excited about that, and they were talking. Mike and John were talking, and eventually, Mike, you handed the phone to me, and I said hello, and I'll never forget how I felt after all those years. I'm actually talking to John Kraft, and to me, it was like talking to a rock star. I've met some rock and roll people, and I met some artists in my life, but John was right up there. It was like, it's still one of the biggest moments in my life, was talking again with John Kraft. And thank you, Michael, for that opportunity.
of
It
course.
meant a lot to me, and I hope it meant as much to John as it did to me to hear his voice. And I know that he looked probably different than I remembered him in college, but as he spoke, I remembered his smile. I remember the look in his eyes, the color of his hair, the color of his eyes, and that little grin he had when he looked at you, and how he could capture you very quickly, and could reach into your soul and tug on your heartstrings and make you laugh, make you cry, all that kind of stuff. That and the Vicodets.
Oh yeah, we got to do that.
Forget the Vicodets.
You
or the
guys,
auxiliary Vicodet.
I was on the wrestling team, so I was out getting beat up somewhere, and I missed this night. But I set it up. I remember I told them we could do it, and what it was we said, look, instead of the Vicodets, which were the dance team, why don't you let us, a few of us, come out and we'll create a choreographed thing. So we'll basically do the dance thing, right?
So we spoofed them.
So
Yeah.
So I wasn't in it. It's in the yearbook, and maybe I'll find a picture of the yearbook and show it. But it's in the yearbook. But Phil, tell about John.
So there were 5 of us.
Yeah.
That dressed up as this girls' drill team. We didn't have girls' dresses or anything on, but we were in like gym clothes. Yeah. But John decided, for the sake of realism, he took 2 heads of iceberg lettuce.
He went shopping for that stuff.
2 T-shirts on, and the under one He took it and he rolled up the heads of lettuce until they sat right on his chest. And then he pulled the other one down. So he had these
And he found the
massive
wig.
lumps.
He found the black wig that went clear.
Black wig and the makeup.
Yep. And Dennis came out as our manager to introduce us. And he had sunglasses and a French beret on and spoke with quite an effeminate accent.
I had to pick something.
And so we came out and we were doing these snappy routines and marching across the basketball court in the
halftime at a
house.
college basketball game in a full arena.
Full arena, halftime. The place was going nuts.
Yes.
And John was doing one of his prancing steps across the arena.
And I might point out
half.
I might point out that the act was not reviewed before performance.
No, and it was never allowed again.
And never again.
And John
felt a one and done.
John was kind of bouncing across the floor, and it was a springy basketball floor. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but gradually, one of the heads of lettuce started to sink down. His shirt started to unravel. And so he had this big head of lettuce about at navel height. And he reached down under it and boosted it back up as he was bouncing across.
Marching.
The place was going nuts. They were just killing themselves laughing because we had pulled in a very conservative school environment. We had pulled off a coup where we were cross-dressing and mocking the cadets. And it was hilarious.
It was.
John didn't just make you laugh. He made you laugh till you wept.
Oh.
Yeah.
And your sides hurt and you were on the floor. And it was just unbelievable how hard and how effectively he could make people laugh. I always felt that was born from the pain of being an only child and not having the association that he had with us. Because we were his family. I mean, he told me about the first time that Junior took him to Rexburg, Idaho, and they stayed in there. And they drove in at night. And they got in a room, and they opened up the next day. And when we were there, Rexburg wasn't much of a town. Now it's way different because it's BYU, Idaho.
Yeah,
3 times the students and 4 times the buildings. But Johnny, who came from the college, and of course Rexburg is, you don't see the next town, and you just see fields of crop and stuff. And Johnny woke up and walked outside, turned to his dad and said, "What the hell have you got me into? I can't live like this." He took him out. Junior put him in, but Junior knew it'd be good for him to be there. Bless his heart. His dad was such a sweet man and knew the good. Remember the rabbit?
Yeah. We had an Idaho roommate, a real ranch boy, and he knew the ebb and flow of the flora and fauna of Idaho. And it was a particular year when the desert jackrabbits had come in off the desert, and they were destructive.
Millions of them.
Yeah.
There were millions of them. And so we jumped in the car one night with Lyle Sodaquist. We call him Sody. And he said, "Watch this, you guys." And he pulled off the road and into a hay field. And as the headlights swept the field with him turning onto the field was alive.
Thousands.
There were just hundreds and thousands of rabbits.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands for sure.
He hit the high beams, and a number of them would stop and look at the high beams and just be mesmerized by these high beams. He said, "Now what? This is what we do. We get out of the car real quiet. We close the door quietly. We take this burlap sack and we go catch these rabbits. We'll stuff them in the sack. We'll take them back to the college and we'll let them go on the 4th floor of the classroom and office building early in the morning so that when students start to show up, there's rabbits running all over the place. So we got out. We only managed to catch one rabbit.
Oh, no.
But we got one. And we got back to town. We said, it's hardly worth getting caught perpetrating this thing for one rabbit. We have friends that live in married housing. There was a couple. And so we went to their trailer. They called them the lambing sheds. You remember that, Dennis?
Yes, I do.
We went to their trailer, found their mailbox, and we took this jackrabbit out and stuffed it into a rural mailbox that had the door on the front and the flag that went up, put up the flag. And the guy's wife came out, saw the flag was up, went to open the thing, and this rabbit came flying out of her mailbox at her, scared her to death. I'm happy to tell you two stories. I'll tell them obviously one at a time because that's the best way to tell a story.
Unless you could speak out of both sides of your mouth at the same time and with forked tongue.
Well, it's been Michael that's been accused of that. I have been accused of many things.
Good way.
Anyway, the first story that I wanted to tell
I feel
was
I feel undefended at this point.
the first story I want to tell was how John prevented me from making a mistake that has affected me for many years until this very day. I had just had a big fight with the girl I was dating at college, and I was on my way home. It was, I don't know, we've got to get the girls in by 12, so it was 12:15 or something, and I was walking home. Oh no. Anyway, John pulled over and I said, take me home, Kraft. Klapier's got a 6-pack of beer in the car and I'm going to go get drunk. And John looked at me across the front of the car and said, if you do, I'll be very disappointed. And I haven't had a beer to this very day.
Good for him and good for you.
And thanks for dropping me into Greece.
I'm just telling it the way I recall.
That's it. Well, that's good. We used to travel with him, and Program Bureau was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Where did we go?
Played a lot of places.
We went out through mid Colorado, and did we get to Kansas somewhere?
No, we did northern Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming.
Yes. Yes, we did. I remember the horses in Wyoming.
They weren't all on the stage.
Right.
Nay.
No, somebody took us out to their ranch or their farm or to their home, and they had these real expensive horses. They were Arabian horses. And we were looking at horses that were $15,000, $20,000 for these horses.
Well, I remember being asked to conduct a fireside, I guess. We did a fireside at one of the local units.
Yeah.
And that day, a kid got home from his mission and he walked up in front of the congregation. He said, brothers and sisters, I feel like a cow in tall grass. I am utterly tickled to be home.
Oh no, he didn't.
He did.
That's funny. Well, I remember we used to mock the Vicadets excessively, and what they would take 4 or 8. How many did they take on the tour?
Oh, 8. Yeah,
8. So these were basically a dance team, and they would do their dance.
Precision.
And, we upstaged them one time.
Lucky for them, it was just once.
Tell that story, Dennis.
Oh, well, the girls, I can't remember where we were. We were in a lot of theaters and doing a lot of traveling. but we were in this theater, and we were off stage, and there were like three or four. I think there were like four girls, ladies, if you will, that were downstage center, singing three or four part harmony a song, and somebody decided in our group, us four, that we were going to crawl across the stage on our hands and knees behind them all the way upstage, but in full view of the audience. So that's what we did. We all got down on all fours in the wings and proceeded to do the hands and knees things across the stage to the other side, and of course got a real nice big laugh from the audience, and the girls were wondering what was going on. Of course, it was the guys again. It was Virgo and Aries and John Kraft, the group.
Did we get a reprimand from Brother Thompson? Remember?
I was trying to think of that.
Always.
There's, I
He
think
came
there
to
was
us.
something, but I don't remember. But
He came to us once. He came to us once and said, "Can you rename the group?" He didn't like the reference to astrology.
It's like that little. It's like that little cartoon character that said, "If I doed it, I did a whipping. I doed it," and we would all four do it. So we took the whipping together.
What was that ridiculous trapeze gymnastic? We'd climb up.
The Flying Bromsky Brothers.
Kraft named that.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
This mimicry of gymnastics, but it wasn't really anything but mimicry. But we could make it work. People laughed at it, or they laughed with us. Or they laughed at it. I'm not sure which it was. I remember
they were laughing. That's what mattered. Yeah.
We didn't care. They were laughing. John and I developed that Rindersella bit, which is an old Archie Campbell poem, and I told it, and he would act it out. And I remember one time, Brother Thompson was like the board of, like the don't step over the line guy. What is that? The
censor.
The censor, yeah. So I did the first time.
Monitoring censor.
He hated dropped her slipper, slopped her dripper. He hated that. Yeah. And then he hated searching across the country. Oh, streaking across the country. So we would fake that bit, and he got mad at that one. But then one night, for some reason, I threw out that the prince went about the country querying the people, and John went into a character that was so lividly wrong. A church audience that Brother Thompson met us at the wing, and we came off, and he's just mad. He's just steaming mad at us, and I said, "Listen to that sound. Don't be so mad. It was just words." But anyway, it's funny. What's your other story, Phil?
Well, the first year I was down there, it was after Christmas. We were in the dorms. I was in Rigby Hall, and you were in the other one.
Hanson, yeah.
And yeah. And one night the power went off. And so the cry went out through the hallways, the sacred hallways of Rigby Hall. Panty raid. Well, it was Rick's college. I mean,
it wasn't going to be too lurid.
It wasn't going to be too crazy because all the girls were in high-walled dorms, right?
Fortresses, yeah.
6 and 8 of them in an apartment.
So, but nonetheless, the hue and cry went up, and then there was down the hall, out the back door, down the stairwell, and through the darkness. I was talking to a girl in the dorms. I was talking to her, and I could see this steady stream of these black bodies through the snow, headed for the dorms. Well, this became like a horrible incident in the minds of the student body president and the dean of men and the state president and everything. And so they called a mandatory dorm meeting. And everybody had to be at the dorm meeting. Well, John happened to be in my dorm. And so he walked in and sat way at the back, up against the wall. And everybody had come in and they'd all chewed us out for, this panty raid and the potential that there was for harm. And the student body president said, how would you feel if one of your friends got into the room of one of your girlfriends? And from the back of the room came this voice as clear as day saying, well, share and share alike. The whole place disintegrated from this very serious chewing out into just guffawing laughter.
John and I were.
It was John.
John and I were doing Summer Stock Theater at West Yellowstone, and he had the head, and we were doing Damn Yankees. He was the devil. He had the main character. So we would go out on the street and do what we called street duty, where we'd go in and out of restaurants and invite people, pass out flyers, invite people to come see the show, because it was a real transient. Everybody stopped in town at the end of the day, grabbed a hotel, and then they moved on, and they're on their vacations. So we do street duty to make sure we had a full house, which always worked, and we were sold out all the time. So as we were getting ready for street duty, he says, I'll be back. I go, what do you mean you'll be back? We're going on street duty in a couple of minutes. He goes, I got a date with a girl. She's going to meet me. I go, where's she going to meet you? He says, Old Faithful Lodge. I said, Kraft, Old Faithful Lodge is 25 miles away. On a good day, you could make it in 25, 28 minutes. On a bad day, it could take an hour, depending on traffic and animals on the road and whatever else. So he goes, well, Brother Thompson, Brother Benson, who was in charge of the theater, he noticed he's missing. He goes, where's Kraft? I don't know. First answer was, I don't know. Second answer was, ask Mike. Third answer was, I don't know. Mike, he went to Old Faithful. Finally, I had to confess it up. He went to Old Faithful to meet this girl. Brother Benson was white. He just was freaked out because he goes, he could take an hour and a half to get in there, an hour and a half back. We need him on stage in 12 minutes or whatever the countdown was. So Brother Benson's walking around backstage with a script, a libretto, reading the lines, getting in costume, getting in Kraft's costume, getting ready to do it. 1 minute before we started the pre-show, which was a comedy thing, which he had several bits in. 1 minute before the pre-show, he walked in and Benson was ready to kill him. I was ready to kill him because I didn't know where he was. I said, okay, great. She better be a beauty. Where is she? And he goes, she stood me up. So he got to West Yellowstone Lodge, walking around, nobody there, had to turn around, beat it back down 25 minutes of mountain road, and went barely, but he did make his entrance. He didn't miss his entrance, although
I'll bet that Mustang was screaming.
that was funny. Well,
speaking of that Mustang, John and I nearly died.
Oh, Stanley Studmeyer.
We were driving back from Chicago to Rexburg and decided to go through Wyoming and up, instead of going down to Salt Lake and then up I-15, to go through Jackson Hole.
Yeah, because you would fly from Toronto to Chicago and then catch a ride with him out.
That's right. So I flew to Chicago. He picked me up at the airport. There was another guy that was sharing gas with us, and the three of us loaded what we had into the Mustang, and we headed for Rexburg, driving straight through, day and night. We got 4 o'clock in the morning, 20 miles south of Hoback Junction, which is outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and the gas line on the car froze. It was so cold.
Yeah.
It was minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit.
John's mom, Yoshi, and sister will be hearing that. So let me tell you, what was around Hoback Junction?
Nothing. The only thing we saw that gave us any kind of sense of civilization was, as clear as a bell, a ranch light that was too far for us to even consider going. I was in a cloth coat.
Oh no.
And so we got back in the car and we said, I think it's time that we pray about this. And so
Yeah.
we got together and the three of us said a prayer, started paying each other back the money we owed.
Yeah.
You know,
Apologizing for past.
for past sins and grievances. Next thing we know, about 20 minutes. And I mean, we're starting to shiver
Yeah,
pretty deep
sure.
now.
It's minus
And
something.
we've got headlights from behind us. I went, headlights. So we jumped out of the car and we ran over to this pickup truck, Wyoming Rancher. And there's his 69 Mustang sitting dead on the side of the road. And the rancher rolls down his window and he said, sure is a pretty car. We're going, that pretty car, don't run.
We're dying.
He goes, well, jump in and I'll take you into Jackson Hole. That's where I'm going. We got into Jackson Hole. There was only one gas station where the guy's wrecker, he'd had it in the garage. He was going around starting people so that they could go and start people because it had been so cold. And he took John back to his car. And he said to myself and the other fellow that we were with, he said, my wife will be down in a few minutes, but she's not much of a talker. She was in an accident and bit the end of her tongue.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Well, yeah. And we sat there for an hour while he was gone to get the car with the tow truck driver. And he got back with these incredible stories of mountain roads with no power steering because he just hooked a chain onto the front end of his car. And him going, oh, trying to turn the car around the corners and stuff. But that was John.
Well, Sachi and family, we want you to know that we loved John Kraft.
Yeah.
And he placed, as you can tell by our stories and our joy in telling them and sharing them, that he placed an irredeemable mark, or immemorable, maybe is better. The irredeemable I've been trying to repent from for 30 years. But, a memorable mark. We loved him dearly.
Yes.
Okay, sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to be a student without him.
It would have been vastly different.
Yeah.
It would have been not nearly as much fun. And I never would have learned the phrase, don't let school interfere with your education.
Yeah.
That was my friend John. You know, we came together at a time when we were at our emotional peak as young people growing up, most impressionable, and we had each other's impressions imprinted on our hearts.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things are formative and last a lifetime. And my life is infinitely richer because of John Kraft.
Yeah. I always knew that I enjoyed comedy, and I always knew that I had a comedic ear because my dad had a good sense of humor. But I didn't know how to share it. And I literally dug down and failed at it with John and figured it out. And finally, I was sharing earlier with his sister. We started telling jokes and then acting out the jokes. Then we would try to do a joke, and one joke I'd try to get the laugh, and the next joke John would try to get the laugh. But we were hit and miss. We weren't always funny. Then we've learned that if one guy plays the straight thing, this is what burlesque taught the world. One guy plays the straight line, sets it up, tosses it to the second guy, and the second guy knocks it out of the park. Then you can be funny all the time. And Kraft was so creative. I'll never forget in Summer Stock Theater at Sherwood Hills, we would pull somebody out of the audience and bring them backstage, and they would grab 3 or 4 props. Well, one night this lady grabbed a croquet mallet, an urn, and a knife. And Kraft did about a 10-minute routine on a rat that was hit in the head with a mallet and carved up with a knife to be stored for later observations in that bottle. And the last line he said was, swear to God, this is what he came up with, all impromptu. It was genius. The last line was that what he learned was a Benny, oh, he called the rat Benny. A Benny shaved is a Benny earned.
Amen.
Brilliant comedy.
That's
What a,
great.
what a great guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, we love him. We'll love his
Sorry
memory
we
always.
weren't, you know, geographically closer to each other. It
Yeah.
would, but just having this time to celebrate his life has been a wonderful blessing for me, and I thank you, Mike, for arranging it, and Dennis for being part of this and sharing those memories. And we send our deepest condolences to the family, but we want you to also remember that there is much joy in the lasting legacy of John Kraft, not just in amongst us, but in so many people that he had an impact and influence on.
I can drop
What a,
in on a couple professors I know, and immediately they'll start laughing about things he did on
Yeah.
stage. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Well, thank you, Mike, for the opportunity that you gave me to actually speak to the legend,
Yeah.
John, from your home. That will, I mean this with all my heart. It will be a long-lasting, sentimental moment for me.
You know
Speaking
what?
Yeah.
John Kraft.
And when we get on the other side, can you imagine the laughter and joy there's going to be?
Oh,
Yeah.
Spectacular.
I already believe there's a
Yeah.
line at heaven because St. Peter can't find any angels to process people through because Kraft's telling them stories.
Yeah.
Our love to the family.
Yes.
Good night.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Well done, me brothers. Okay. I'll get that on his way to his sister.
Good.
Oh, Kraft.
That was good.
Kraft,
Mhm.
Kraft.
If does anybody have a current picture? I've been still looking online for something on John Kraft in Chicago, Illinois.
I've got some stuff. I'll post them up to you at some point.
I don't have a 1970 Rick Ida yearbook.
You know what? I've got a thing I'll have Linda put up to you. It's in Google Video.
Okay.
It's the hour interview I did with him 2 years ago. And my son and Linda and I went down to his apartment, and my son Kurt kept saying, "Now, okay, tell me about this story." And he'd ask him about a story, and then John would retell the story because Kurt had heard all the stories growing up. So I'll get that to you both so you can see it.
My
That'd be
kids
cool.
too. My kids felt his passing because they knew of the stories of the legend
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how much he meant to my life.
All of us. Well, yeah, and
I was just a baby. I mean, think about it. I was 17 when I went to Rick's college.
so was I. So and
Wow.
John was too. I turned 18 in September. He turned 18 in December.
And I turned 18 in March
Yeah.
of the next year.
Yeah, we were babies. But it was
Yeah, I
fun.
was 21.
It was a great way to start life. Okay, brothers, I'll get this together. I'll give you a link, give you a share with it once I do it. I'm gonna put the two pieces together,
Okay.
make it work.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Thanks, brothers.
Adios, muchachos.
See you later.
See ya.
Love you guys. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, good morning. Sachi, I want you to meet John Rock. John's another part of Johnny's story. And Rock and I were on the wrestling team together. And so, because we got to be friends there, he soon associated with your brother. Rock, tell us how you first met John.
Well, I first met Johnny through Mike. Uh, John would come to the wrestling room and hang out a bit and work out a little bit with us.
He wrestled in high school.
Y-
He wrestled in high school.
Yeah. So we got to know him there and then became almost instant friends. So hung out with Mike a lot. As you know, John was the funniest guy around. I remember waking up many mornings with my cheeks and my ribs stiff and sore from laughing at him all night long. So we had a lot of fun, the three of us.
It was the second year, so 70, 71, because
Yep.
you're younger than we were. We got there in 69. You came in 70. Do you
Right.
remember a time when, like at Sober Society or somewhere that he just got the crew going and you just sat and watched it all happen?
So Sober Society was the pizza place downtown, and every time we were there and John was with us, it was hilarious. He just was so fun to be around. We would stay at Sober Society for hours, and and they let us stay there because we were so fun to have in the store.
We got to know the guy, and because when John and I would walk in, or Kraft and I would walk in with you, um, things started to happen. He would do things. I remember I told Wendy this yesterday that he would put the apron over or the towel over his hand and walk through the restaurant like he's some kind of a
The
waiter.
waiter.
But he was picking up uneaten slices of pizza and they'd sit down and eat them all. But John Ray was the guy that owned the place, and he loved having us come because we drew a crowd. And when we were in the place, something was going to be funny and people would notice it and laugh about it. And John would perform anytime he got a chance. He'd just walk up to a table and just start doing bits with the salt shakers and the plates and the food and I mean, it didn't matter what he had, he could make it laugh.
Yeah, he was so creative with anything and just made everything so much fun.
Yeah, I think John Ray was happy to have us there. I remember one time Kraft and I went to John. We go, John, we're hungry. We don't have any money. He goes, what you got in your pockets? So we literally went through our pockets. We had some string. We had maybe 35, maybe 50 cents, some pennies and nickels and a quarter maybe. And, just stupid stuff you carry around in your pockets. He said, okay, that's good. And he took it, scooped it off the table and gave us a pizza. And then Phil would sing there. Remember Phil singing there?
Yeah, Phil would sing.
And
Phil would sing.
then we came down to Salt Lake City when we got involved doing after we graduated. To see, did you graduate or when did you go to the U?
I went to the U in 75.
Okay, so we came down so did you do 2 years at Rick's or just one?
Did a year at Rick's, went on my mission, came back and did a year at Rick's. You were helping coach,
Yeah, that's it.
and then to the University of Utah.
And then John and I went and did Playmill Theater. And then we came down to Salt Lake City and we hooked up with you. And I remember the most vivid memories. And then you came in on the tech crew and helped with Warrior.
Yep.
That was a show, that was a show that we did 180 performances. And she's a theater person. Tell the story of how you made that light bounce. Tell about that scene.
So the spotlight was a big, huge, called a super trooper, and the light came from two welding rods burning together, and it was big and heavy. And in part of the play, I had to bounce the spotlight across the stage and light up an actor, and then the letter would exchange, and I would have to bounce it back over to the next actor.
And then it had to bounce with time. So you had two people
Yep.
on the right stage and it had to bounce with time. Boing, 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 land.
Yeah, I had to do it in time with the music and not light up the orchestra and not light up the ceiling.
And how
And
did you?
it took me a while. I had to practice that quite a while to get it to not light up the orchestra in the ceiling, and then open it and have it land exactly on the actors. So I actually put like a rifle sight on the spotlight and dots on the window, so I would know exactly where to light things up, and that worked really well.
Didn't Norland, the director, come up and congratulate you for what
He,
a
well, he was not happy the first time I did it because I'm lighting up everything, and then he wanted to know what I did to get it so right. And it was like they made a rifle sight on it, spots on the window to make sure I had everything right.
now? So we lived with you for a while, and
So during Warrior, I met my wife Susan, and so she would spend a lot of time there. I rented a duplex, and that's where we were going to live when we first got married. And Mike and John came in before we got married to help pay with some rent and different things. Susan will tell you a story. She come to the apartment one day before we were married. Here's all John Kraft's buddies out on the porch, and they're not being very good. And she is pretty mad, and she goes, "Where's John?" And they said, "Oh, he's inside sleeping." Well, she met me. They met John Kraft. And so she goes in, and there's John Kraft in there. She kind of got after him a little bit for messing up the house and having the loud music outside in a neighborhood where we weren't supposed to. So after we got married and we lived there for a while, and then we found a house a couple of blocks away to rent. And we rented that, and Mike moved into the basement. We had a bedroom in the basement down there, and
I
Mike
think I
moved in.
was selling cars at the time.
Yep. And then Kraft would come and stay, visit, but he would stay and
Stay.
stay and stay. And
Hey.
you had to step over him on the living room floor in the morning because he was asleep up there. Uh, I don't think John did laundry. He just bought new clothes. And we had a pile of his clothes. He was so much bigger than us, nobody could wear them. But I did find a sweater that I really liked, and so Susan threw it in the hot water and shrunk it down, and it was a nice sweater. It fit well.
So I'm sure we caused you and Susan a few intense conversations in the bedroom about our presence.
I was fine with it. It was like not a big deal, old home days. But for Susan, it was quite an adjustment. But she did well.
Yeah, she did. So tell us about your oldest son and his name.
Okay, so we have our oldest son was born, and I loved Mike and John so much, and we were such good friends. I named my oldest son KC for Kraft and Claypier, and he spells it KC.
And the sad thing is, John,
and Casey was always proud of that, although he doesn't remember meeting John because he was just a baby. But Casey is always proud of that Casey name.
And he's now a coach in Arizona.
Yeah, he's the head wrestling coach now at Embry-Riddle University in Arizona.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah. What would our life been if we hadn't had Kraft?
Dull. Well, maybe not completely dull because you and I have a lot of fun, but certainly he brought so much light into us. And this is back when he's been home off his mission, and he was just a lot of fun.
Did we ever take him fishing or hunting? I took him hunting.
Yes, we went hunting together. We went up with you, and we went up the South Fork of Chalk Creek.
And he got that. He had that 7mm.
Yeah,
that cannon.
So we're in a tent, and it snowed all night. And we get up in the morning, and we're looking around, and there's a small buck outside, and John shoots at it and wounds it. And John, not being a very outdoorsy guy, so I got on the track and started tracking that deer. And Mike was helping, and John was helping a little bit. This deer was not hurt. He was bleeding a little bit, but he he was going a long ways, and I tracked him pretty much all day and finally caught up to him. Mike finally found me. It had snowed on us and it was foggy and we were cold, and we built a big fire and warmed up. And we got back to camp, and John had left to go play a flag or a touch football. So we had his deer up there ready to go, and no John to put a tag on it.
That's so him.
And then and then when you guys were in West Yellowstone, I came up and visited and camped and brought my dog, and we went fishing on the Yellowstone did some fly fishing down
We
there.
took him down into that canyon.
And it was a slide down into the canyon, but it was it's steep hike coming back out.
Yeah, if you ever look at a picture of Yellowstone Falls, look right down in the bottom of it, and that's where we took John. That's where we took him. I remember him when we were doing Sherwood Hills. He got called to be a Sunday school teacher. And you've never been in a Sunday school class until you've watched John mystify these little LDS sweethearts from Cache Valley. And he would teach, and it was interesting.
It would be interesting.
But he held their attention, and he was crazy.
So,
Oh, thanks. Anything?
and John could dance. I mean, when we'd go to the dance stuff, he had the moves. I mean, the crowd would split and watch all of us, but he would watch John do his moves and stuff. He was very talented, very athletic.
Tell about that. We used to have these really good bands come to Rick's, and they played all the covers of all the songs everybody liked: Chicago, Bachman Turner, Overdrive, Guess Who, American Woman, all those kind of late 70s, early 80s songs. And we would dance. There was a whole group of us, pretty good friends, and we'd all dance with our backs to the band and then have the girl in front. And then the guys would drop out in front, Mark Bybee and you and Kraft and me and Wayne George. These guys would all get out and kind of show off a little bit. So I remember going out and just picking some gal and say, "Come on, you want to dance?" And head to the front. And she's going, "We're not going to the front." And I go, "Yeah, we're going to the front." Johnny was,
we didn't have any trouble getting girls to dance with us, that's for sure.
yeah, he was fun. Fun guy. I miss him. You know, it's funny. I stayed in touch and I called him, and I know you and I talked to him a couple times. And I'd call him, and half the time he never answered his phone, but then we'd get together. So it's been interesting now that he can't call him. It's been a noticeable.
Yeah,
It's
it
45
is.
years since I'd seen him last when I went and saw him 2 summers ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the most disappointing thing, is that I didn't get to visit with him very much.
Yeah.
After he moved back.
Yeah.
I will tell you a funny story though.
Sure.
When we got home off our missions, we decided we was going to see who could date the most girls. And we had to make it a date. You had to ask somebody, you had to spend money, and it had to last at least 2 hours. And we would show up at some of the activities and stuff, and John would show up with 2 or 3 girls and count all 3 of them as dates, because he would ask them and spend money, and he would always make sure it was okay with the first date to take on a second. He'd have been a great polygamist.
A polygamist.
Yeah, he was a dating polygamist, and everybody liked to hang out with John for sure.
That's fun. Well, thanks for giving me a minute of your time. I'm sure John's stepmom, Yoshi, I'm sure she appreciates this, knowing that there is this life he lives for. We knew him for, I guess, I knew him from 69 until 78, I guess.
Yeah.
We're pretty much inseparable. Yeah, he was a character.
Oh, and so John and Mike would do their comedy stuff. They would do Who's On First and Rendersella. And I've seen it so many times, and it was never the same twice. John would ad lib and throw stuff in, and it was always hilarious. always impromptu, and they were a wonderful comedy team. I wish we had videos of them.
Yeah, I wish I got a few that are. Well, no, I got Gary and I don't have Kraft. I don't have any video. Of course, the technology wasn't there. We
Yeah,
had to do it in film, but I don't have any performance with John. And yet we would just sleep here. I was telling one story that Norland Jacobs, I visited with him. He was our director in Warrior and then the Summer Theater, Summerstock, and he said one time John and I were doing Rindersella at Playmill Theater, and we had a real roll going. We just had the crowd. Everything was working. And when you get like that, you can get pretty creative and you can build it out. And so we were running long. We were like 7 minutes over time, and we had a whole nother show to do. And one of the cast members came up to Norland and they go, "They're running over time. They got to stop." And Norland goes, "No, they don't. Because the people are going to go home and they're going to remember that over what they're going to remember that we're going to do in Damn Yankees or Pajama Game or whatever."
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, we could. And it wasn't, you didn't just laugh at John. You laughed until you hurt.
yeah. Absolutely,
I remember,
absolutely.
were you there the night he entertained till 4 in the morning at the Stockman's Cafe?
No, I missed that.
No,
It was probably in training.
you were probably trying to be an ass, trying to be fun. Well, thanks, buddy. It's good to
Here,
talk.
let me introduce Susan.
Oh,
No, no, I look terrible.
She can let her, because she put up with John for a while. Just come and poke your head in here and say hello.
Susan,
I'm
Susan,
not ready for the day.
we're there you are. We're making this for John's stepmom Yoshi and his stepsister. Her name is Wendy, but John called her Sachi. And so we're just kind of getting some memories for them from a part of John's life that they didn't know, because John's dad married Yoshi in, I guess, 75 or 74, somewhere in there, after our missions at any rate. And so it's a part of these memories that we're talking are a part of John. Share with Yoshi stepping over John's body, sleeping half naked on the floor of your apartment when you were
It was-
first married.
Waking up Saturday mornings to do housework and him being laid out on the front room floor in his whitey tighties.
Did he wake up?
No.
Well, he's
But I just appreciate him and you and all the others for accepting me. And I just felt like part of the gang, and I just loved him, and he just made me feel so important and so special that we even named Casey after
yeah,
Mike and Kraft. So
he was great. You guys are great. Love you a lot. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, John.
You bet.